All right, let's get it. Let's get into our next topic. Because I mean, we can talk about the Game Awards all we want. Technically, guys, we have one more show right before the Game Awards next week. So I expect more Game Awards talk to happen next week with another special guest. But let's. I wanted to talk about this briefly with a fellow Nintendo YouTuber because I'm very curious where everyone is sitting on the idea of Nintendo's next gen system, or just a more powerful system. What if it's a Pro? I have no idea. But whenever they release hardware that's significantly better than the current, like everyone's all over the place with when the right time to do this is. Because when we look at Nintendo's traditional timeline, clearly it's not next year. They have too many big games coming out. Okay, well, too many big games next year means it's probably not going to be the year after. Because what does Nintendo usually do? They just stop making games for 2 years because they're making them all for the new system. They let their current system become completely irrelevant, and then they release the new one. That's been Nintendo's traditional MO. You know, it hasn't always been the best decision. I think that Nintendo has been desperately needing to learn from Sony over the years, where I don't always like how Sony starts their generations, but nobody can debate with how they end it. They always end strong, which leads to massive sales of their next system because there's all this faith built up because they just released 3 big games in the launch year of PlayStation 5 that were PlayStation 4 games. So Sony's always done kind of the opposite. Nintendo usually starts strong, peters out at the end. Nintendo, starts strong, peters out at the end, and then Sony doesn't have anything for a couple of years, anything major. I mean, yeah, they had Ratchet and Clank and everything, but all their big games are coming next year. And then, then they have a really strong end. And I always kept saying that Nintendo's strategy has never made sense to me. Every consumer electronic out there has always done best when you're releasing your new platform while the current is still relevant. And a lot of Nintendo fans, and I think this just happens because this is the history of Nintendo, think that's wrong. Why would you ever release a new platform when you have all these big games coming and all of the, the system's still selling 20 million units or whatever a year? And we have a new president, Shintaro Furukawa, who we have no idea what his release strategy is going to be. He wasn't here. He wasn't the one leading Nintendo when Switch came out. Switch was Iwata's last idea. Then it was launched by his direct under person in Takahashi. And now, he kind of was obviously towards retirement age anyway. So we all knew that was just a temporary interim CEO until they figure out who was going to be next, and it ended up being Shintaro Furukawa. And we have no idea how he's going to manage things. But there's one key word or one key phrase that Shintaro Furukawa mentioned, I think almost a year and a half ago at this point, in an investors meeting. He mentioned that Nintendo has this history of hitting really high peaks, but then just falling off a cliff. And he's seen it at Nintendo for the last 2 decades. That Nintendo just always lets go when they're at the top. And he doesn't understand why that's always been the case. And his number one goal as CEO is to not let that happen. And I think the best way to avoid that is to not let the Switch become irrelevant before you release your next platform. Now, some of you guys are, well, the Switch will never be irrelevant. Maybe not to you personally. But in the sales charts, when the Switch gets to the point that it's going from 20 million a year right now down to 5, and that's when they decide to release a new one, people have already lost interest in the Nintendo platform and moved on to other things. And Shintaro Furukawa's point is that's the way Nintendo's always approached it. Milk till you can't sell anymore, and then try to get a new product out the door.
Drop off the cliff and then have to...
Because it takes a while. Well, it takes a while to get the new product out.
I mean, yeah, right.
Like, I don't think in 2010, Nintendo knew for sure they were launching Wii U in 2012. I don't think they knew. They didn't know for sure. Because they didn't know Wii sales were going to drop off. But what they did know is, well, we got to start pushing for that next system. So we're going to stop making major games. We still have Skyward Sword coming, all right? That's going to be a big deal. We still have those, the Rainfall games getting ported over with the Xenoblade and Pandora's Tower and stuff. We're going to port those games over. Those are going to help carry sales. Sales are going to be fine. It turns out 2010 is when sales went like this. And then they nosedive even further because they decided we're going to announce the Wii U in 2011, a year later, before they even released Skyward Sword HD. So, or Skyward Sword, sorry, it wasn't HD at that time. But, Nintendo has this long history of basically destroying their own sales potential every other generation. And even when you look to the past, like with the NES, SNES, N64, and GameCube, each system kept selling worse than the last, and each system was always launched after the last system wasn't relevant anymore, and the sales had dropped off. So Nintendo has this long history of doing this, which is why Nintendo fans just expect, oh man, we're not getting next-gen Switch till 2025. It's going to be forever off, which, by the way, it might be.
Well, I mean, they did say we were halfway through the
I know,
life
that's
cycle,
what I'm saying.
so.
It very well might not be out till 2025 because that would match exactly with we're halfway through the life cycle. Nintendo doesn't know how long the life cycle of Switch is going to be.
Well, they do.
No, they don't
have an idea, but...
You want to know how I know they don't? Because their life cycles are based on sales.
Yeah.
As long as it's selling, they're going to keep it going. And they said they want this to be a really long life cycle. The thing is, Nintendo does lies all the time.
Oh, yeah.
No one should believe pretty much anything they ever say about anything because not that they don't know what they're talking about, but a lot of it is, what's the best way to sell Switches right now? Well, make people feel confident it's going to be relevant for the next 4 or 5 years. So everything you say is going to exude confidence in your product, which is fine. Sony does the same thing. Microsoft does the same thing. Everyone does that. No one's going to start talking about their next-gen platform.
Our console's crap. Don't buy it.
I mean, they're not, and Nintendo's not going to start talking about their next gen until they're ready to show their next gen. That's just the way it is.
No, I know. Yeah.
It's just a question of what's Nintendo going to do. Right. And this is where I want to kind of throw this at Thomas, where I have this thought process, and I've had multiple angles on what Nintendo could do next. I have one thought is they do away with generations, and they just keep releasing incremental upgrades, and we eventually get like a Switch Pro, and then after like 3 years, they phase out the original Switch, and then they release another slightly more powerful platform, and then they phase out the Switch OLED and stuff, and all of a sudden, it's kind of like phones, where phones slowly, like 4 gens back, finally start to become a little bit less relevant compared to new ones. There's that strategy, which is based around the fact that Nintendo's using mobile technology, so it makes the most sense if you're using mobile technology and you want to keep up with it to a point, but keep it on the affordable end, that you would do more frequent updates, which, again, we're almost 5 years in and we haven't had a significant upgrade yet, power-wise. So it's kind of sort of working against my thought process on that right now. Or there's the traditional sense, Nintendo waits until the Switch isn't relevant anymore, is barely selling, and then they finally release something new and hope that could somehow reinvigorate an audience that might have moved on. Like I think a prime example with the Wii is that there should have been an HD version of the Wii that converted every single Wii game into HD, probably in 2010. That what should have been their next step. Let's release our current platform that matches the 360 now and automatically upgrades all games to HD. I know that would have been a bit difficult to do, but it would have made the most sense. Because then everyone who owns a Wii would have been like, oh, I got to get this new one so my games look better, play better. And they didn't do that. Instead, they did the Wii U, which didn't work out. So I think there's that. And then there's obviously what I hope for a strategy where Nintendo doesn't let the Switch become irrelevant. Maybe it's not this upcoming year, but maybe it's like 2023. We're like, yeah, okay, we're going to get something out now, whether it's a Pro or next gen. But we're not going to just stop releasing big games along the way. We're not going to delay, say, what would be a big, like Metroid Prime 4. Say Metroid Prime 4 is a 2023 game. They're not going to delay Prime 4 to launch the new system. Instead, it's going to be, no, Prime 4 is going to come out in the summer when it was supposed to come out on Switch. However, the next system is backwards compatible, and you can play it day one there anyways. And maybe we release a patch that lets it be, I don't know, 1080p, full 1080p, or take advantage of 4K upscaling or something like that. Or maybe everything takes advantage of that. So I want to throw this to Thomas. Like, what do you think Nintendo is going to do with the future of their platform? Because they're at the top right now, and every time they've been at the top, they just throw it in the garbage. So what do you think is going to happen?
Okay, so there's as you said, there are 2 routes. I'm personally a fan of the route that they kind of consistently update the Switch for a while. Like every maybe 3 or 4 years, they'll just pop in a new chipset, and it actually is very reminiscent to this bad boy behind me, the Oculus Quest 2. I don't know if you guys are into VR at all, but basically, Facebook, now Meta, released the Oculus Quest 1 back, I think it was 2019. And what happened was they released it with like a mobile chipset, and it was very similar to the Switch, where it was kind of like a custom, it was like some Snapdragon Qualcomm thing, and it was it was a mobile chipset, but it was pretty underpowered, and developers had to work really hard when porting games over to make it so it could actually run well. And then year and a half later, so a lot faster than Nintendo, they came out with the Quest 2, which is like, yeah, it's like 10x more powerful in a bunch of in like almost every metric, because it just used the newer chipset. And obviously mobile chipsets are progressing at a rate much faster than I guess I don't know if it's much faster, but they're progressing in a way where you can they're becoming more accessible and whatnot, and more powerful at a astronomical rate that we're not really used to right now. So what I think Nintendo should just do is, I think every 3 or 4 years, maybe starting next year, they just announce, I don't know if they want to name it Switch 2. I personally wouldn't. I would do something along the lines of Switch 2022 edition or something like that. Just a small little footnote, and phase out the base Switch model, where, so if you want to go buy a Switch, you are now buying between the Nintendo Switch 2022 edition with a new updated chipset, the Switch Lite that has the updated chipset as well, and the Switch OLED, which has the nicer screen and the updated chipset. Now that's the best way to get just pure power. Obviously, if you want as the 4K handheld screen upgrade, they'd have to do a different line as well. Maybe they could upgrade the OLED to make it the Switch, I don't know, Switch better screen edition. I don't know what they would want to call it besides Switch OLED, but there's so many ways they could do it. I think just that kind of consistent flow though, and then eventually you'll just get, like, if you try and download, if you're on an old iPhone and you go to the App Store and you try and download something, it'll just say this doesn't work with your current hardware. Get this version of the phone to use it. I think they should just do something like that. Kind of treat the Switch as not as much of a console as they have in the past, but more so just a new piece of technology that kind of everyone has to have and will consistently be updated, and everyone will have a different version of it. But you should be able to play most games as long as you're not like 7 or 8 years behind. That's my personal thoughts. Obviously, that's also self-motivated because I'm not trying to change my entire channel name switched up if they come out with the Nintendo, just something completely different. But I think the Switch worked well for them, and Nintendo's all about innovation, and we say that that's a good thing, but stick with it. I mean, they clearly struck gold here. This is the best console gimmick they've ever had, bar none. Like, you can't argue that. I don't see why they don't stick with this for at least another half decade or so. Like, at least just let the Switch brand stretch for a full decade, because it's working well. Like, it just works. That's my thoughts, at least.
Also, really convenient for your channel.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, I don't want to.
I didn't even think about it.
I ain't in that game. I'm Switch stop now. So that's why we went with Nintendo Prime. It's always going to be Nintendo.
Yeah.
So I think I'm safe.
Well, yeah. I honestly I was not thinking long term when I created my channel. This was originally a 1 week project, which kind of blossomed into more of a 4 year long, now 5 year thing that I'm doing. But
that's nice. Good. That's good.
Yeah, no, it's good.
But YouTube stuff, it wasn't supposed to be anything either. So
yeah, I think that's the way most of them start. Because if you start with the intention of, okay, I got to make this a job, you just kind of loses some of that magic, I guess. But if it kind of blossoms into that along the way, at least that's what I found. It's more fun. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Agree with that. Definitely agree with that. Oh man. So we got any thoughts, Eric?
It'd be nice to see them actually not drop off the cliff, like you said.
Yeah.
It's much easier to jump off to climb back onto the top of this table than it is to climb to the top of Mount Everest. And it feels like at times Nintendo, they have the audience, they lose 90% of it. Oh, by the way, now I have to try to gain you all back again. Why? When you already have the audience, give them something better. You might lose a few,
There's also the idea of the Switch itself unlike some of Nintendo's other things like Wii sort of ran its course, and the next step for motion controls was VR. Like that was really what made sense to go next with motion, and Nintendo didn't do that. They let everyone else kind of do that. And I understand that maybe their thought is that VR was a bit too niche to really rely on that as like a main platform, and so I can understand maybe not going that route. But it was also, but you let everyone else take your idea and expand upon it, and you never did that. It's like you kind of just I introduced an idea, and now everyone else is doing what they want with it. We're kind of done with it. And yeah, we still technically have motion to this day, but it's way less prevalent. And then you look at the Switch concept. What's the concept of a Switch? The idea is it's an all-in-one system. Nintendo had their handheld and home console in one system for the first time ever. So that's obviously huge for Nintendo from a development standpoint. In theory, should lead to more games being made for the platform. There has been the unfortunate truth that there was a pandemic this generation, which helped sales, but didn't help game development. So we'll see. That also could lead to a really, really strong end to the Switch, because look at what's happening next year. It feels like 2017 is repeating itself.
Right.
And 2017 was insane for Switch.
And are we building into the next gen then?
Yeah. So like that, and that's the thing. The Switch idea doesn't feel like it's done after one gen. It just doesn't feel like one of those one and done situations, because look, what's happening? The Steam Deck's coming out. Why? Because the Switch idea was good.
And it
was a good idea.
I don't think Sony or Microsoft are going to go in this route at all, period, ever. I mean, I can't say ever, but...
Well, Microsoft has gone the streaming route. A couple things with that. One, obviously, there's the xCloud, which is available on pretty much everything. And then there's also the fact that, and I actually just did this 2 weeks ago. I'm in a couple Madden leagues on the Xbox Series system. And I could literally go up in my room and stream it from my system to my phone and just play right there on my phone with a controller. No problem. Like, that's kind of Microsoft's solution to, well, we're not going to be, and you could actually do that solution over the internet. Like, I could access the system at a hotel room, but have it at home.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work as well. PlayStation, by the way, has been able to do that for a while as well. It doesn't really work that well. It's mostly just for convenience in your home. So I guess more like the Wii U, where you're a little bit tethered. You can go further, but you're still kind of tethered to your home Wi-Fi network anyways. But that's kind of how they're dealing with it. And plus the xCloud, plus Game Pass being, not just an Xbox thing, it's PC. So like, you can use Steam Deck comes out. Guess what? Steam Deck now just became the best Xbox Game Pass portable system ever, because all the games are also on PC. You'll be able to play them on Steam Deck if you install Windows, and off you go. So, which, we'll see how well Steam Deck takes off.
And Microsoft's laughing all the way to the bank because Windows too.
Yeah.
I mean,
and well, that's the thing. Like on Steam Deck too, it doesn't come with Windows. So like,
yeah,
we'll see what people do with it. Steam Deck has a lot of promise, but I think a lot of the game performance on Steam Deck is reliant upon using SteamOS. People don't talk about this a lot with PC because we don't worry about it on our laptops and our computers, but it is something you need to worry about in a handheld. Is there's a lot of overhead with Windows that's not there in SteamOS, so that's going to affect game performance. And again, so everything we're talking about. Oh yeah, but I can play my Steam library, or I can play my good old games on here. I can do Xbox Game Pass. Sure, install Windows and do all of that, but they're only talking about game performance in relation to their own operating system. They're not talking about it in a Windows situation. They're using a Linux-based OS, so we'll have to see what happens there. But next gen, I mean, Nintendo's sitting pretty. I just don't want them to get complacent. They've always gotten complacent. And Switch to me feels like this could be an idea that should be around multiple gens.
Oh, for sure.
Nothing like they're in a market to themselves. Steam Deck's like the first real price competitive thing to come into that market, and even then, it's from Valve. They're struggling to even launch the thing, let alone ever get it on store shelves, because we're just talking about the system launching, folks. We're not even talking about Steam Deck being able to walk into a Best Buy and buy a Steam Deck. We're years away from even having a conversation about walking into a retail outlet and buying a Steam Deck. You can walk in and buy the Quest 2. They have them literally at Walmart. Yeah. You can walk right in and buy one. We're not even to that conversation point with a Steam Deck where you can walk into a retailer and actually buy one. We're just talking about their pre-order numbers off their own website, trying to get the system out the door, and they're struggling to do that. So we are so far away from Steam Deck even being a serious competitor to Switch, because for it to be, it needs wide availability, which is just they're not even in talks with retailers at the moment because they can't even get the thing launched. So
no, I agree.
I think Nintendo's situation, that just makes it even stronger, because Steam Deck proved that somehow for $400 they can release something that just destroys the Switch performance-wise. Now, it is a bigger package, and there's obviously some, It's a bit more clunky looking in comparison, but $400 on the go PC gaming, that sounds exciting. So imagining what Nintendo can do with something like that. Now, granted, Nintendo is not, Steam Deck's using AMD technology. Nintendo has a contract with NVIDIA. NVIDIA typically has better GPU technology. They actually have really good scaling technology with their DLSS. So that's the best scaling technology in the world. So there's some exciting ideas of like when people talk about 4K switches, they're really not talking about native 4K. And I want to be clear, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X can't really do native 4K either, guys. I know they're going to throw it in your face all you want. I'm telling you right now, they do not have the GPU capability to do native 4K at 60 FPS on high settings in all these games. It's just, you know what kind of computer you need to build to do that? I mean, it's like $3,000. You ain't getting it in a $500 box. However, that doesn't mean that you can't get basically ultra setting games at 1440p that are upscaled to 4K. And I think that's really what they're going to be focusing on there. And I think that's similar to Nintendo, where we could start to get, we're not getting 1440p or 4K, but we could get 1080p games on what would be PC high settings, upscaled to 4K through DLSS. And that, to me, means that this partnership with NVIDIA needs to bear something out. Because one thing I think people
it needs to be the actual unprecedented partnership, like they had with E3,
EA. Oh my God, the unprecedented partnership.
Actual unprecedented
partnership. The unprecedented partnership of we're giving you last-gen versions of everything and then never coming back again.
Right.
Although Need for Speed was actually a legitimately good port. That was like, that team actually gave a crap about it. But it didn't matter at that point. EA was already done. That was the last game they were bringing over. So I think that Nintendo's in a really unique situation right now where they have a market mostly to themselves. The competitors out there are struggling to really even get units. And Switch is just kind of sitting there. Hey, we just have the best-selling Mario Kart game of all time just happened. Like, by the way, we released this game like a decade ago, and here it is, and it's the best-selling ever. And it was released on a completely different platform. Hey, Animal Crossing just out of nowhere blew up to 30+ million, no problem. Cool. Maybe the pandemic helped, but hey, whatever. Look at that with Zelda. Hey, we're laughing to the bank with 25 mil. Breath of the Wild 2 might clear 20 mil easy. Who knows? So Nintendo's at this point where everything they're releasing is selling and selling extremely well. Metroid Dread might even be the best-selling Metroid game of all time at this point after the holiday sales period. We don't know yet. We don't have numbers from Nintendo, but it could be up there. We're sitting in a situation where Nintendo is very clearly doing the best they have ever done with an individual platform in the history of their company. And this includes DS. I know you could say DS had 150+ million in sales, but Switch has almost sold more games than the DS had with less units on the market. Nintendo games are selling significantly more units than they've ever done on any other platform, including the DS, including the Wii. The only game that's like significantly past in numbers is like Wii Sports that was bundled in with Wii. So like Nintendo is in the midst of their best individual platform they've ever had.
My biggest
I
worry...
just don't want them to blow it. I'm so scared they're going to blow it.
My biggest worry is that Nintendo's...
Don't get cocky like everyone else does.
Not even that.
They always get cocky. Sony did it. PlayStation 3. Xbox did it. Xbox One.
Yeah. My biggest worry is that Nintendo goes, we know better than you, and then goes completely some 180-degree.
Oh yeah, there'll be a streaming stick. Their next gen's going to be like a Chromecast.
You're like, what? This is not anywhere near what anybody wanted.
Not backwards compatible.
And yeah, so that's my biggest worry is that Nintendo just does left field, and you're like, why? This was great.
And I think they made a number of smart choices with the Switch. One, its form factor is something that's infinitely repeatable. It's a tablet with controllers on it. Hello, everyone knows what a tablet is. Tablets are still popular. They're going to forever be popular until we get to the point that we're wearing glasses that just display the whole world virtually to us. Like, we're going to be, in this world where they have a very smart design, and some of the feature sets make sense. Like, game cartridges. Yes, but you know what game cartridges have? A speed advantage over discs, which means we don't have to install the games to the Switch if you buy it physically. That matters. That actually matters. Like, no one wants to talk about that. The cartridges versus disc argument. Yeah, you're right. Discs are significantly cheaper for a PlayStation 5, but you got to install the game anyways. And most of the games usually not even on the disc. You have to download it. So what was the point of the disc? All the disc is a key that lets you play the game that you already put on your system. That's all it is. It's just an unlock key to access a game that's already there. And Nintendo actually gave you physical games. Some of them do require downloads. But you just pop it in your system and play. No online needed. You don't have to be connected to the internet. Just pop it in and play.
Mm-hmm.
And that matters. That's convenience.
Yeah.
That also, because of the size of the size and the type of cartridge, that could be a forward compatible cartridge. They could just use that same cartridge on a new platform. Like Thomas brought up earlier, you pop in a cartridge and it just says, hey, you need to get the new platform to play this game. Mm-hmm. We actually saw that with the new 3DS. If you bought Minecraft for the new 3DS and you put that in an old, like a normal standard 2DS or standard 3DS system, it would tell you it's incompatible, even though it fits in the slot. It would say, sorry, this is incompatible. You need a new 2DS or a new 3DS. Then you go get that and you put it in and it works just fine. Like they're kind of on that similar path here where they have a cartridge that they could just keep using. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to stop. They've already got it up to the point where they're making 32 gig cartridges now, standard at manufacturing. To me, that suggests Nintendo has a game that needs a 32 gig cartridge coming soon. I literally don't know what game that could be. Part of me wants to say Breath of the Wild 2, but I mean, they made that work with 13 gigs. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they need 32 suddenly. That would be insane to me, but could be something that needs it.
Well, and it may be that they only need like 20 or 22.
Well, apparently the reason that third parties supposedly haven't been using the 32 gig carts is because Nintendo wasn't making a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So because they weren't in mass production, they were stupidly expensive. Mm-hmm. If you wanted a special line ran for you. Mm-hmm. They've existed. There actually is a couple Switch games that do use 32 gig carts, but they're not like big sellers.
It's more than likely the fact that your Breath of the Wild 2 is slightly bigger than your current.
I mean, Breath of the Wild 2 could easily be 20 gig plus.
Right.
And then they would need a 32 gig cart for that.
Why you would need the 32 gig cart.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily that it's going to take up the full 32.
And by the way, there's overhead on these carts because they're flash memory, guys. So you don't actually get a full 32 anyway. It's more like 30 gigs. But yeah, it's a very interesting situation that Nintendo's in for their next gen. I mean, Thomas, when do you think they're going to, you wanted to see the incremental thing, which is exactly what I want to see. I think it makes too much sense in this market. It makes too much sense in this market. Then you're not ever abandoning the audience. You're just slowly transitioning it every single time, rather than saying you must buy our new system to play our new games. Mm-hmm. No, you can still play them.
Yeah.
But also, the next time we have an upgraded system, maybe then you need either the old upgraded system or the new upgraded system to play that game. You can't play it necessarily on the old stuff. So, when do you think they're going to release even any sort of more powerful system? When do you think it's happening?
I think it's late 2022. I think we're close. Yeah, I think I can see it fall.
Breath of the Wild 2 launch with it?
I think it's possible. I mean,
that's been a rumor for a long time.
Obviously launched with the main Switch, and then Switch Lite launched with Link's Awakening. Yeah, if you want to go that route, Breath of the Wild 2 launched with a more powerful Switch.
It lines up, people. I think it lines up.
It does. It does.
They didn't have a Zelda ready this holiday, so they used Metroid.
Yeah.
By the end of this year, or that made no sense. But 1 year from now, we will have a more powerful Switch in our hands. I don't know if it's going to be a full. If it's going to be a full Switch Pro, if it's going to be that full, PS4 to PS4 Pro type jump, or if it's going to be more the low key. They don't advertise it too much, but they make a couple tweets about it, make a trailer about it, say, hey, there's if you buy the Switch with this type of box and maybe it has this symbol on it, it's more powerful hardware. It'll be able to reach a higher target resolution in docked and handheld. It'll have a higher target frame rate because all of Nintendo's games are using adaptable scaling resolutions and scaling frame rates. Bowser's Fury will when playing in handheld, it'll scale down the resolution. I'm pretty positive when stuff starts going crazy mode and the frame rate starts dipping. So that indicates to me that they're ready for this sort of thing. They're ready for they're making everything scalable so that when they add in more higher quality hardware, it just is kind of seamless and they got to do very little work on the back end. I think it's coming within the next year. That's my gambit, I guess. But who knows with Nintendo?
I've sat here as my fan base has been trying to convince me otherwise, for 6 months now, and I just keep going. I understand all of your guys' reasoning to not have anything new next year. We just got OLED. There was 2 years before from the light. I understand all of that, but I also there's been a lot of smoke around this system potentially existing. There's also been the pandemic, which likely affected their ability to get enough chips if they even wanted to launch a more powerful one this year. That could have caused a delay in that, but they just happened to have all these OLED screens. So why wait? Why not update the current design, and then just wait till they're ready, or wait till they have enough chips ready to do a proper launch, which that's really the way you should be doing it. Everybody out there, by the way, you shouldn't wait till you have. Maybe not. You'll never meet demand at launch usually, but at least have a couple million ready to go. So there's actually people that you could see are playing it, not just scalpers. Because by the way, for all the sales we talk about with Steam Deck guys, how many of those are scalpers that bought up those pre-orders?
Quite a bit.
That are going to jack the price by double on eBay. Like, yeah, that's the thing. Like, they already don't have that many units for launch, and then that's not even counting scalpers. So we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be one of the most scalped devices next year, personally. And by the way, no shade on the Steam Deck. I think it's actually a really cool device. It's just, I don't have a reason to trust Valve. They've not given me any reason to trust them with anything. Like, supposedly, they're working on Half-Life 3 again. Yeah. Okay, cool. I've heard that.
Are they?
I've heard that.
Are they, though?
I know. But I've heard that for how long? 20 years now? I've heard that they're working on Half-Life 3. And
here's the thing, though, with the Stream Deck. Or the Steam Deck, sorry.
Yeah, don't confuse it. Don't confuse it, because, they had to go with Steam Deck when the Stream Deck's a device. Like, we have to stick with that deck word. Why is everyone using deck?
Sorry.
I don't...
No, sorry. Here's the issue with the Steam Deck. You're not going to get 2 versions of it. Because they can't go past the number 2.
You mean you can't get 3 versions?
Yeah, exactly. They can't go past the second version.
So we'll get a Steam Deck 2.
Right.
3 will forever be a rumor that never happened.
Right. Chapter 2 pre-orders available. Available now. That's it's not.
We're dropping pre-orders for the 3rd, and then it's just never.
Yeah,
it's just forever delayed.
It's not a good look at all.
Yeah, they're not very good at getting the 3rd of anything.
And they'll just randomly trickle rumors that it's coming again.
Oh, yeah.
And then